the places we love, we must vote. America is a nation of many nations, many histories, many experiences. But despite our different paths, we all converged here. You see, our common ground is the land itself, our playgrounds, and places we love. Now we must protect them from the effects of climate change. If you love the land, make a plan to vote this November. Start your plan at makeadamplan.org.
Hello, everyone. Tommy Caldwell here. Welcome to tonight's digital premiere of Purple Mountains. I'm your host tonight, Tommy Caldwell. And after the film, we're going to be joined by the star of the film, the filmmaker, professional snowboarder, father, a man that wears many hats, Jeremy Jones, for a Q&A. So that'll be super exciting. Anyways, this film, I'm pretty in love with this film because it does something that means so much to me. It tries to bring us together. In a world that's so divided right now, it tries to find understanding, common ground, and that's really what we're trying to do with climate change and POW. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy the film, and yeah, I'll be back in just a little bit after the film, and we'll be talking to, hopefully, Jeremy. So, all right, see you guys in a little bit.
In this highly industrial decade, just how pure is our air? We contaminate by oil and gas fumes.
Pollution and overpollution, unless checked, could so warm the earth in 200 years as to create a greenhouse effect.
This land that is ours together is a great and a good land. It is in that spirit that I address myself to those great issues facing our nation which are above partisanship.
Will your policies become more, say, pro-environment now?
They've always been pro-environment.
Anyone who allows political bickering to weaken our progress against pollution does a tragic disservice to every American.
We have worked as one people for 25 years, as one people.
One of the key strategies was to sow doubt about climate change science.
There has been consideration both of the scientific certainties and uncertainties.
We do not know how much effect natural fluctuations in climate may have had on warming.
No one in the scientific community disputes that this would be catastrophic. The science is screaming at us.
If we set our minds to it, we could in this country produce 100% of our electricity.
I said before the world that we needed a strong global agreement.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. We're getting out.
We're gonna
build an anchor. I'm gonna
go over this top roll on a belay, and then we'll go from there.
1, 2, 3. Woo! How much more rope?
Yeah, that's probably your last turn.
Okay. Off!
All right, Jeremy. Be careful.
1, 2.
Traditionally, when we think about climate activists, we might think about conservationists, we might think about people who have dedicated their lives to protecting the environment, or we might think about people who live along the coasts. But the truth is that climate change is impacting everyone.
The environment wasn't always a divisive issue. You know, at the end of the day, what we're fighting for is clean air and clean water and a sustainable future for kids. So why is that so polarizing How do we get there? You know, when I started Protect Our Winters, I had no idea that the front lines would be, here in Washington, D.C., but it just became clear that real action needs to happen at the policy level, at the federal level, at the international level. Winter as we know it will be half in 2050. And by 2090, 80%, which means winter as we know it will be 3 weeks long. That is heartbreaking. The winter sports community represents $72 billion, 695,000 jobs, which I point out is 70,000 more jobs than the extraction industry. As bad as that is, and the thought of not having winter as we know it absolutely breaks my heart, we realize the global effects on the importance of snow for our water. California, 60% of its water comes from snowmelt. The Sierra is this perfect aquifer. The alarms are everywhere. This is the challenge of our time. We represent a huge audience and they want action on this, but we are running out of time. I definitely never thought of myself as an environmentalist. I was not looking to be a so-called environmentalist, but my whole life is committed to the mountains. I ended up having a lot of success going to the world's most beautiful mountains and figuring out how to ride those. The best lines are the ones that you are like right on the edge of life and death.
Big mountain riding is about exploration and figuring out what's around the next corner. You know, that's where a lot of the buzz comes from.
It was through that time and spending time amongst the glaciers that I started really seeing this change. I'm seeing the glaciers recede. I am seeing more consistent rain. I mean, nothing's more heartbreak than rain to the top of the mountains in January. At that time, I had a massive carbon footprint. I realized, even though my career was just cranking, I couldn't justify that my love was having this just blatant, obvious impact on the planet. The other key factor is I was finding the edge of the boundaries. If I can figure out how to walk for days on end and live out in these mountains and hike up these mountains, I have 90% more of the world's mountains to choose from. My first foot-powered trip in Alaska, I got this whole new group of people, and I've sold these other people on the idea that, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to camp and we're going to hike these things.
See you later.
The problem was I didn't know if I could do it.
Holy shit, we should get out of the way. Oh my god. Oh. Are we going to get work right here?
I don't think so. When we shifted to foot-powered snowboarding, it brought in so much more complexities, and in many ways it was more dangerous because instead of being on a slope for 1 to 2 minutes, we're on a slope for 1 to 2 hours. You are forced to let everything strip away and give the mountains your attention. Yeah, just let me check it real quick. 1, 2, 3. These windows of opportunity when this unridden, big, serious mountain is safe to ride, that window opens and closes with these really little subtleties.
Dropping.
I'm alive today because of my intimate connection with the mountains. So naturally, I saw changes to the mountains, and it coincided with what scientists were telling me. As I've learned about the science and how critical snow is to humanity, I'm like, if we don't have snow, the least of our problems is going to be that a chairlift isn't spinning. The ripple effects on that and the disruption of that, I can't even imagine what that means on society on a whole. Family is hugely important to me. Now my highs in the mountains, they're generally tied to being out there with my kids. I really started thinking, like, what is the planet my kids are coming up in? Any parent wants to provide their kid with this safe, opportunistic, sky's the limit kind of life. The more that you look at the science, it's really clear that we are doing a major disservice to the kids being born today. I knew that collectively we needed to come together to do something for it. And that's what led me to start Protect Our Winters.
I'd like to see you guys have any calluses on your hands. I bet most of you came from a lot of money and you love to ski, which is something that, people that come from money can do a lot of. The working Americans like myself, which you have nothing to do with and don't understand and you don't respect, they vote, and your climate agenda is totally wrong. People like you can ski and play in the snow while all of us work our asses off. So that's why your organization's not going to be around in about 20 years.
I hate conflict. I pride myself in always finding common ground with people over anything. My idea of a good time is not debating trolls out there. I mean, there's 413 comments on here. I don't even know where to start. Well, here's the classic. Yeah, you fly to Alaska and to Alaska Range, probably all over the world, and I bet you drive something that utilizes said fossil fuels on a regular basis, and those boards you ride have product made from fossil fuels as well. Hashtag hypocrisy, hashtag bandwagon, hashtag don't bite the hand that feeds you. Dude, don't say stupid crap, this planet is warming, with or without humans. It happens every 10,000 years. We all want to keep riding, bro. Coal is cleaner than wind generated. There's just no science. Why doesn't Jeremy Jones set an example and stop using fossil fuels himself? No more helicopter flights, synthetic clothing, or epoxy or fiberglass. My response to that is I live a very examined life, chipping away at my personal footprint. It is important for us to embrace ways to reduce our personal footprint, but we also need large-scale systemic change to get the reduction that we need. It's just not getting there with just personal choice.
The Earth may or may not be heating up, but there's no debate that the fight over man-made climate change certainly is.
We're now at 17 years and 8 months of no global warming.
Carbon dioxide has not caused weather to become more extreme.
We just had 2 of the coldest years, the biggest drop in global temperatures.
Bottom line, big tornadoes, F3 and larger since the 1950s, have dropped dramatically. Bottom line, we've gone the longest period without a major U.S. Category 3 or larger hurricane hitting the U.S. Bottom line.
This isn't about science. It's not about facts. This is really about government controlling almost every aspect of your life.
97% of all scientists believe...
Is this
a bogus number? It's so not a bogus
It's
number.
so a bogus.
Okay, yours is, mine is, yours.
A lot of these scientists are driven by the money that they receive. If there was no climate change, we'd have a lot of scientists looking for work.
What about the scientists who say it's worse than ever?
I don't think your party's passionately committed to science or to fighting global warming or to dealing with the scientific facts we live with.
I think the science is very mixed.
It became clear to me that I live in a bubble with like-minded people and that there was a large population of this country that have different views when it comes to climate. I wanted to know where the spin was coming from, so I decided to reach out to some of the most prominent climate deniers in the country. People that have spent their whole professional career trying to discredit this mountain of scientific evidence, but they're not actually scientists. That's up, Chelsea. Okay, I'm recording.
Hello.
Hey, Mark. How you doing, Jeremy?
Hold on one second. I can't hear you. Let me get sound. You see me. You don't see me yet?
I don't see you, though. I'd love to see you.
All right.
Awesome.
Hold on.
Oh, wait. I got you. Cool. All right. To kick things off, again, it's pretty clear that you don't believe in the impacts of climate change. And I guess just getting some background behind why.
Well, good question. I won't go too far into my background, but essentially I come at this as an investigative reporter, not a scientist. I like to joke that I sometimes play one on TV, a scientist, but I look at climate as essentially a political movement using the latest environmental scare to lobby for politics. When you testified before the House Select Committee on Climate, that is one of the most anti-freedom, most regulatory things. They're excited about the prospect of government regulation. So that's where this debate goes off the rails.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. The facts should not be political. Hate the fact that it's a partisan issue. I guess as you've dug into the science, I mean, what is...
Science gets in line behind the preferred policies. And we see this with the National Academy of Science. Oh, this is the body founded by Abraham Lincoln, this august science body. No, it's literally 100% dependent on government funding.
Do you have kids?
I have 4 kids. They are being taught that, my old 14-year-old Jeep is not a weather machine. It's not, SUV does not control the weather, that we are not in unprecedented times of any kind. And I tell them not to worry about climate 1 ounce.
It's terrifying for me, what I'm seeing happening with snow. It's tough as a business. I worry about my kids. It keeps me up at night.
The idea that we face a climate catastrophe is not happening. The idea of a climate emergency is a political construct. When I hear you say about the volatility, the extremes, that's called weather. That's called climate. It does that. You can't predict anything. It's just that when people tell you that, the climate's changing, we're causing it, this is a record here, it's meaningless.
I think the important thing is to understand what it is that divides climate activists and climate skeptics. Really what it boils down to is, are we creating a climate crisis? Are we creating a climate where we have much greater negative impacts than positive impacts?
You guys recognize that the Earth is warming. You're not sure what the most effective way to address that, or how much humans are playing a role in that?
I think your question, it presupposes that a warming climate is bad, or a warming climate is something that we must fight.
Where I live, we get our water from snow in the mountains. Not having snow would affect, our water source.
Well, you make a few points there that we see statistics and facts that contradict this. So, for example, first of all, about the snow, if you go to the Rutgers Snow Lab, what they say is that for the past 30 years, the data that they have is that there's been increasing snow cover extent.
Well, I guess just to back up that, I am not a climate scientist, but I am someone whose life literally revolves and watches every drop of snow fall in my range. The stuff I do in the mountains is really based around having a really good understanding of snow. And so
it's easy if you think that if you've heard in the media or from other people, from activists, that global warming is causing a decline in snow, to therefore look around and try to get a little confirmation bias on that. But the evidence is what the evidence is. On average, the amount of snow cover that you're going to see today is greater than it was 10 years ago, is greater than it was 20 years ago, is greater than it was 30 years ago. And I'm just amused that you would laugh at that when you're just going on subjective thoughts and I'm going on scientific evidence.
Misinformation and propaganda works because it's based in reality, but it's not real. Reading a scientific paper and pulling one fact that supports your narrative is how the game works. Because really, how many people read the science? It's only when you dive deeper that you find the real facts, and facts don't lie. Satellite data has shown a slight increase in snow cover in the fall, but the average snow cover throughout the year has decreased year after year after year. I've seen it firsthand, and I've heard it from real climate scientists. We can choose not to listen, or we can choose to do something, but we can't ignore the facts. It's science. The facts are the facts. So I have been talking recently to these professional climate skeptics, deniers, what have you, and the consistency of the messaging has been impressive.
The fact that many of these people have the same talking points is not a coincidence. Almost all of them are funded through right-wing and libertarian think tanks, and those think tanks are themselves funded by the fossil fuel industry. So there's a very conscious and very deliberate effort to pump out disinformation. It's always been about discrediting the science, trying to make us think that the scientists don't know what they're talking about, or that scientists are just in it for the money or the attention. Besides trying to discredit the science, climate change deniers have really played on identity politics. They've tried to make conservatives think that they should not accept the evidence of climate change because if they do, it will lead to higher taxes or bigger government.
Have you had any success in changing someone's mind on climate?
There are some people who are really, really recalcitrant, but in the middle, there's a very wide range of views. People who maybe kind of get the issue, but they don't really understand why it's important, or they've heard these things about maybe it's a liberal hoax, and so they're not that happy. And I feel like most of my work is in that space. It's trying to explain to people this is not a liberal hoax. It's not a hoax of any kind. Nobody invented climate change as an excuse to expand big government or raise taxes. But we have this problem, and now we have to figure out what the solution is. And then the other thing is just to remind people of conservative and Republican solutions. We have models of successful conservative interventions. And so then the question becomes, so why has the fossil fuel industry been denying these models? Why does the fossil fuel industry tell you that climate change is a hoax rather than telling you, oh, well, we could fix this with emissions trading just as we did for acid rain? And then that brings to the third important point, which is that this is a big lie, that it's actually a con game, that the reason we're confused and divided is because the fossil fuel industry has been trying deliberately to confuse and divide us. ExxonMobil is laughing all the way to the bank, making trillions of dollars in profits off this con game, and we're stuck paying the bill. We have to vote. We have to vote in people who will represent our interests and not the fossil fuel industry.
After a decade of going to Washington, D.C. with Protect Our Winters, I've learned that these elected officials don't actually lead, they follow the people. And there are a handful of purple states that are equally divided, Republican or Democrat, that can go either way. These are states that swing elections, and these are the places that will choose our course on climate action. But a recent New York Times poll showed that climate is the most divisive issue in our country, even more than guns. So much weight is put on these elections with the hope that people just take 10 minutes out of their day or an hour out of their day every 2 to 4 years and just check a box for what they believe in. I live in the blue state of California, just 30 minutes from Nevada, and Nevada is one of those crucial states. It's actually the most mountainous state in the lower 48, so I started exploring Nevada just to get a feel for it. All right, Ming, we might just have to start exploring. Oh, I just really missed carrying a heavy pack. As a country, we used to agree that the environment was worth protecting. Conservation used to be a bedrock issue for conservatives not that long ago. Richard Nixon championed a lot of our environmental laws. He signed the Clean Air and Clean Water Act and created the EPA. Why has it become so polarizing that people have made it their job to troll people like myself that are fighting for clean air and clean water? It's just amazing how divided we have become. Yeah, just totally blown away at the raw wilderness in Nevada. Everywhere I look, protected land covered in snow that provides water for farmers, family, and a healthy ecosystem. It's what I live for. Seeing new mountains, picking out what really calls your name and figuring out how to climb them. One thing that probably gets under my skin more than anything is when I'm being attacked as being un-American. Because I'm very proud about the country I live in. Patriotism isn't just about waving the flag around. It's about coming together as a nation and working hard to solve these key issues. America is based on people standing up for what they believe in. It's based on people having different opinions and coming together and finding common ground. What we stop doing as Americans and society is talking to each other. Big, badass mountains. Love my Nevada board.
The whole point of the climate change advocate alarmism is shame, to get you to stop behaving in ways they say are destroying the planet. That's how they've succeeded in it. They run around.
I always wondered if we are as divided as they say we are. I think everyone wants a clean, healthy environment for their family. We just gotta figure out how to get there. I decided to go to one of the most conservative counties in rural Nevada and talk to these people that love the mountains as much as I do.
Right here, we're about a half a mile from the base of the Ruby Mountains. From our backyard, we can hike basically from here to 9,800 feet and ski back to the house in the wintertime. It's a winter wonderland here. I've been involved with National Ski Patrol for 23 years. You know, I grew up in the Sierra foothills, and the mountains are my home. That's where I find my peace. It's been a great place for my kids. Skiing is the one hobby that really challenges us. But all of us take an interest in reviving old Volkswagens or old dune buggies and bringing them back to life. Those are things that bring our family together and keep our family connected.
Oh, that's a simple fix.
Ah, looks like we need a new hose clamp.
Oh!
Many of my friends have been born and raised here. I think coming from a place that's very different than this has given me a lot of insight. Like, the cool thing around Elko County is trucks, horses, and cows. I mean, I agree, those are all cool, but there's a lot of other cool stuff too. Skiing, rocks. I don't think anyone else in my class of like 200 is going into geology. Right now with the climate change, I think it comes down to our groups. Just like high school, we have our little social groups and we want to fit in. If you agree with another group's perspective, your group might say, hey, we don't like that, and kick you out. I think a lot of people don't speak up. They just go with the group mentality of they believe this, so I will also. Volkswagen people are their own group. It has no lines. They share a love of driving their old tin cans. Skiing is very similar. They come from all different backgrounds, all different beliefs, but when it comes down to it, like, skiers just want to ski.
I'm psyched to be at your home mountain.
Yeah, this is the Big Elko Snow Bowl. I've patrolled here for a long time. It's definitely a great place for local families to learn how to ski. We have our one chairlift.
And how much is the lift ticket?
$20 for a lift ticket here, $20 for a rental. And if you're just doing the rope tow and you're just getting going, it's cheaper yet.
What's up, Justin? Nice to meet you.
God, pleasure to meet you.
You're a geologist?
Yeah, that was what I went to school for. Mostly what I'm doing now is project management in mining.
Yep.
Both here and doing quite a bit over in Kazakhstan as well.
Wow, there's some mountains there, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
It's awesome to get out here with you. You know, someone makes their living as a hunting guide, and as I learn more and more about conservation, I've learned that hunters are really the original conservationists, you know, through the Roosevelt era. And quite frankly, I think the outdoor community has a lot we can learn from the hunting community when it comes to protecting these public lands. What were you doing when you were boring holes underground?
Yeah, so in New York, they were fixing the old aqueduct that supplied 500 million gallons a day to New York City. We came in, dropped like a $15 million machine down there, put it together, and then drove away from the existing aqueduct, went underneath the Hudson, tied back in. So we'd go down the bottom of the shaft, get on a locomotive, go into the tunnel boring machine, and then you'd just be sitting there mining and building rings all shift.
I'm assuming you must have tons of engineers, like the science and engineering to do something like that is cutting edge.
It's almost like going into space. I had a great time, but like I said, it was either I do that and like focus on a career and money and like a powerful position, or I come out and just focus more on life and living. I'm stoked you hit me up. Yeah, I was surprised. I was like, man, there's thousands and thousands of riders, like pro riders that probably want to go ride with Jeremy. I don't know why he's calling me, but.
Dude, this is your range, man. You spend more time here than anyone. You're the only local split boarder I know in this area.
Oh, I have no doubt climate is changing. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
I guess my question to you is, why is it that, like here, we're standing on ground that was considerably warmer, maybe a tropical climate at one point?
I mean, a lot of the stuff was ocean, which is amazing.
So the Earth has had several cycles, and it's always changing.
You're totally right. Glaciers move and shrink, and I mean, they shaped these mountains.
That's right.
It's just that the speed is what the alarm is coming from.
Okay.
You know, records show that it's happening 100 times faster than it ever has. Like, your world operates on peer-reviewed science from the best universities in the world.
Right.
And that science is from the same universities that the climate science is coming from.
Right.
There's massive consensus from the scientific community that burning CO2 is warming the planet. I mean, imagine you going down 900 feet down and being like 98.8% of the scientists are telling you to do it this way. The rest are saying you do it that way, you know, you're gonna die.
Yeah, yeah.
I would assume you guys are going with the 98%.
I'm definitely not like kind of fighting, saying, oh no, it's not happening.
You don't fight the science.
No, but it's just tough around here because, you know, the climate talk gets lumped into a bunch of other policies that are mostly on the liberal agenda. A lot of times that comes with a lot of other stuff that affects their business and their livelihood.
And their ideology.
For sure, yeah.
I'm a single issue voter, as you can tell.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get past everything. If you're serious about climate, you can get elected, I'm all in. So one of the things that we tried to do is to unify what we call the outdoor state, which is all these outdoor enthusiasts, hunters and anglers, people that really relate to the outdoors, that rely on a healthy environment, to come together to fight for the environment. And specifically, we recognize that long-term climate change is the biggest threat.
Yeah, because I mean, it is a common thread.
Right.
I mean, yeah. I think it should be a no-brainer that it's a nonpartisan issue. I mean, it should just be a human issue. Unfortunately, I think we're going to need something borderline catastrophic, if not catastrophic, to wake people up and to make serious positive change. Unfortunately, that's what I feel in my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter's only 9 years old, and I'm genuinely scared for her future.
Yeah.
Genuinely. I mean, it's no joke.
It's hard because the last thing you want to do is like tell your daughter that, you know, it's like everything's fine, you know, like you don't want to freak them out, but it's like.
I'm laughing because I've already told her that.
There are numerous coal-fired power plants here in northern Nevada, held to really strict regulatory standards, emission standards. You look at the emissions coming out of those coal-fired plants in those, you know, second and third world countries, and it's a black cloud coming out of it. And it's nothing that you see coming out of the ones here. And like I say, the regulation in the US is far and above the regulation across the rest of the world. We had this whole Paris Climate Accord, and we pulled out of it, and it was pretty much for that reason. Was, you know, the US didn't want to pay for these other countries to say that, oh yeah, we care about the environment, but we're not going to do anything about it.
What bothers me, I think, with some of the climate change legislation and stuff that's gone on is it really affects just our country, and we're still doing business internationally. Here we cripple our industry, but we still contribute to pollution by still buying those products from someone else that's just going to pollute the environment.
My big issue with it is, you know, the US extracts more fossil fuel than any country in the world.
Right.
We heavily subsidize it. A ton of it's on public land, and we know that the burning of fossil fuels is a major contributor to warming of the climate. We do know ways to create clean energy. I just would like to see the country embrace that more. At the very least, I'd just love to see an even playing field.
It's going to have to be phased out eventually,
right?
You know, just because, I mean, we're going to run out of those resources. I mean, the main word there is transition, and you know, it's not a light switch. You can't just shut it off. And
100%. There's not a single plan out there that says like, shut off all coal and oil tomorrow. It's this.
Depending on who you listen to, yeah. I mean, there are some, and there's radicals on either side.
Right.
In reality, everybody's probably looking at something down the middle that everyone can agree on, but you know, politics has become a game recently, and
sporting event.
Yeah, exactly.
Cage fighting.
Yeah.
I think the big thing is the solutions for it, you know?
Yep.
That's where people get hung up, I think, and it's easier to blame, like, there's no problem.
Well, I think debating solutions is a great debate.
Right.
We have half the country that is poking holes in the science when we need 100% of the people figuring out solutions.
Yeah, no, for sure.
You know, I like to think about it like climbing a mountain. Like, I'm not saying we have the summit ridge, we have our Hillary step to equate it to Everest figured out, but we know which way the summit is.
Yeah.
And we're still in base camp arguing about how to finish the summit ridge.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe we should just start walking to Camp 1. We definitely know how to get to Camp 1. We actually know how to get about 3/4 of the way.
No,
Let's start just going one step at a time.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot we have in common.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you're hunting in the mountains, as I am. I'm just hunting for different stuff.
Yeah, you're hunting for the ultimate turn, I guess, and I'm hunting for the elusive mule deer.
I don't know if I could take the shot, because full disclaimer, I don't eat meat.
Well, full disclosure, I'm a carnivore, so I'll take the meat.
We get some epic sunsets in this state, that's for sure. We're lucky to be here.
We are lucky to be here.
I appreciate the conversation, it's good. I have more questions than I have definitive answers. I'm not opposed to someone proving me wrong. I don't have that big of an ego where I feel that I'll never accept information. I just want to see it presented to me in a fashion that seems credible.
I think if you step back, you know, we're all on the same team. We're on Team Planet Earth. Classic coolie. Yeah, man, we're doing it. Love this stuff.
Yeah, it's great, man.
You got a nice backyard, Danny.
That's right. What dreams are made of.
Nevada boarding.
Dropping, baby. Hell yeah. Yeah, buddy.
Keep it going.
You wouldn't think that, you know, hard rock mountaineer from Northeast Nevada, a pro snowboarder, California, whatever, really meet up, talk about, you know, everything and go snowboard in the mountains. That's not something that's normal. But it's the type of communication and interaction that I think we need to get out there more, get different opinions. Coming from a bigger city or from a different state, you got different things that push your buttons, different things that's important to you. And just because I haven't thought about it and it's not important to me doesn't mean that it's not a big issue. Yeah, Jerry.
I met some great people in Nevada, even made some new friends, had some great conversations, and it turns out we are a lot closer on many of these issues.
Yeah, get it.
But the heartbreaking reality is that unless some conservative leaders change their mind on climate, there's no candidates that these conservatives who care about the environment can vote for. It made me wonder if a conservative leader could get past identity politics and take climate serious.
Are you afraid of the climate crisis? If I only listened to politicians like Al Gore, I'd be afraid too, very afraid.
So I came out of the precincts of the right as a young man. I found myself working at the Cato Institute in 1991. I was hired to oversee their energy and environmental policies. For the better part of the next 23 years, I spent my time at Cato arguing against the case for climate action.
You're not that worried.
Not particularly. There have been about 13 studies. 4 of the estimates are that the economy would actually improve if we have a...
But I found my ability to make a convincing case just completely fell apart over time.
It's a monumental move that very few people have made. What changed your mind?
It was not any one thing. It was a series of 3 or 4 things. The first thing was my lack of faith in the overarching scientific narratives we were telling. It also became clear to me that I had not been doing my due diligence in really putting a critical eye to the arguments I wanted to believe to be true. That seemed intuitively pretty strong. And I found over and over and over again, I was seeing variations of exactly this kind of thing. Sometimes it was cherry-picked data sets. Sometimes it was misrepresenting the position that was actually being taken by the mainstream scientific community.
I'd love to just ask you a couple quick fire questions on what they're telling me, what I'm consistently hearing. So climate change is natural. We've seen fluctuations throughout history.
That's like saying death is natural. We've seen people die all through history. That doesn't mean that Bob shot Jim. The kind of argument is that? I'm sorry, it's Friday.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Okay, next one. There isn't a consensus amongst climate scientists on human-caused climate change.
Screaming total out of this world goddamn lie. Every single survey of credentialed, peer-reviewed, published climate experts shows a near absolute consensus.
Earth is old. We only have 100 years of data.
Yeah, both's true. But we know how to estimate temperatures from the past based on, carbon rings and all kinds of sediment analysis and ice core. We're not like making this crap up or playing on a Ouija board.
Addressing climate change will ruin the economy?
Yeah, these things will not be cheap. It's going to cost, depending upon your estimates and your policy preferences, anywhere between $6 and $20 trillion to globally decarbonize. But what are the costs of not globally decarbonizing? Well, there'd be a shit ton more.
I can tell you, my biggest takeaway is just how blown away I am on their just utter and total certainty that there is no problem here. It was actually really hard to have a conversation with them because they're so cemented in their point of views.
Risk management is not about picking the most likely scenario based on what we know and saying policy needs to be determined on that scenario. You have to weight the probabilities of each of these scenarios coming to pass, and looking at the costs and benefits that follow from each of them. And if you do that, it is absolutely unmistakable that we need to decarbonize as fast as possible. Because if we're wrong about the scenario, we don't get the more likely scenario, we get a low probability, high impact scenario. So it's game over. There's no other planet. There's no other way to, we're completely effed.
Right in here.
Under your eye.
And then under this eye. Yeah. Yep. Hold on. Okay, I got you.
Right here.
You're good. All right. We're off. So we want to move through the convex rolls with speed and kind of be a little light on them. And then, Cass, with your line, I want to dial you in with the cornice entry. There will be slough, so if you do have to stop or you fall or something in the fall line, expect some slough coming down on you. 3, 2, 1, dropping! First crux of the day.
Mia Jones, drop. Oh, it makes a nice heel turn into a toe turn. Yeah. Nice air.
Tiff, you should get some Mum Pow.
Woohoo! Yeah, Mom.
It's not hard to understand what's at stake here. But sometimes you gotta step back and realize what the fight's all about. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do need to stop arguing and start working together on solutions. We have an opportunity to make real change. Change is scary, but change is constant. And with change comes opportunities.
Cass.
Yeah.
Are you going Cornice or the Rock, or are you cross?
Cornice.
Okay, make sure you have your direction perfect.
Ready?
Oh, so close. Good joy. I think it was Martin Luther King who said, you can't beat hate with hate. You can't, beat darkness with darkness. It requires light. You see in the media, online, everything, it's all about like, how can we get everyone as mad at each other as possible? I want to do this. The end goal is to try to connect us around clean air, clean water, and a sustainable future. The path we're on is a path of destruction. It's unsustainable. There's a real sense of urgency, and that's going to take a lot of work, and that's what we're pushing for. The only way I'm looking my kids in the eye in 20 years is going, I fought like hell to try to get us on the right path. But at the end of the day, we need climate champions leading our country. We don't need the whole country on board. We just need 51% in the right places. And if I can do that, one voter at a time, that's how it starts. Just like climbing a mountain, one step at a time, one voter at a time.
Hey everybody, hope you guys enjoyed the show. My name's Jake Black, and I am the program manager at Protect Our Winners, and I'm stepping in for a moment as Jeremy's having a little technical difficulty, so we just wanted to keep the conversation going, and yeah, just Tommy and I are going to chat here for a little bit about the film, and yeah, welcome back, Tommy. Well, first off, I know this isn't the first time you've seen it, but what do you think about the film here?
Jake, great to see you, by the way. I imagine Jeremy is probably out mountain biking or enjoying this like fall crisp temps, which it struck me that the people who are watching this film must really care about the world if they're in here right now in like September, like right in the best climbing season, right as it starts, and they're taking time to watch this film. So thank you to everybody who showed up and watched the film and is going to get out there and vote and figure out how to solve these problems. To your question though, what struck me about the film? I mean, I really love the concept in this film because I live in a very conservative town. My father actually is somebody who's quite conservative. He seems to be on the fence about how he's going to vote, and that right there tells me that somebody that's close to me is on the fence. I gotta sway them. We gotta sway them towards voting towards the climate. Voting people in that will be climate champions. And so that's what the film is all about. And then having those conversations. I mean, those conversations are so hard. You can even see it in the film. They're kind of awkward. They're so hard to have, but we need to learn how to have them. I mean, especially in a COVID world, we need to kind of fight through the obstacles and figure out a way to have these conversations. And this film kind of demonstrates that.
Yeah, I mean, and that I think it's such a difficult thing with the world these days is we see everything as such black and white issues of it's right and wrong and good and evil. And I remember actually there's a book that talks about this, but nobody thinks they're the bad guy. And so, recognizing that this other person's, their opinion's just as valid as yours and opening up that conversation is incredibly important. So kudos to you for talking to your family about this. I know, sometimes it's even harder to have that conversation with, those that you love the most because it can get so heated.
Yeah. And, one thing that bothers me tremendously these days is that conservation has become such a polarized issue. And that's just nuts in my mind because, conservation was built by Republicans, the whole idea of conserving land and setting it aside for future generations was not a political issue in the past, and it's become that, and we need to figure out a way to kind of break down those walls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeremy, welcome back. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, Jeremy, how's it going?
Good. Sorry for the delay, but hello to everyone. Great to see both you, Tommy, and Jake.
Yeah, great to have you too. We just kind of, the film just wrapped up, and we were chatting with the gang here about how important these conversations are in the film. And yeah, I mean, really thank you for making this film. And we'd love to, I know you've made a lot of movies over the years, and it's this one I would say is probably one of the most in-depth projects you've made in a different way. And so I'd love to hear from you as to what was it that inspired you to make this film, and and I believe you've described it as one of the more intimidating projects. So can you tell us about how, this came from idea to fruition and, everything in between, and how you were willing to stick yourself out, like this?
Yeah, good question. I think it's, I've done a lot of films, and it was definitely the most intimidating because in the past we make these snowboard movies, and it's kind of like, you've watched them, Jake. It's like, oh, it's been 8 minutes of talking, turn up the Metallica and show someone almost dying and wake up the audience. And so to go into this film and be knowing that it was incredibly light on snowboarding, sorry everyone, but also then getting into this issue of climate and really peeling back the layers on why we didn't, why aren't we embracing the solutions? And that it would be I'd have to almost go and take this different role as documentary guy, was scary, but I just kept knowing, the stakes are so high on climate. I do have an audience. I've made films. And so I'm my intentions are pure, and I know I can't just bring out a shred movie, right now with everything that's going on in the world. And so I just really backtracking to that. That's what led me to keep pushing it, because it's so common. I mean, these films are hard to make, and Bones was the director. Really, I got him on board and got him fired up. And it's just one of those things where I have sponsors and different people like, so what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And I just kept being like, Purple Mountains. And the original trip where I'm with Danny, that's in middle of January. And at that point, no funding for the film. And I'm like, we just got to go there. And I funded that first trip myself. And I'm like, at the very least, we'll do like a 3-minute edit on backcountry snowboarding in Nevada. And then, that just kind of got the ball rolling.
Awesome. Nice. I love that, Jeremy. It's yeah, I mean, I've learned that through climbing. Whenever you want to make something happen, you can't let the barrier stop you. You just got to like start up the mountain and see what happens. And so it sounds like that's how this film came to be, as with really anything great. So yeah, thank you.
So Line in the Sky, Tommy, is like a great example. I'm assuming that's one of my all-time favorite climbing movies, behind the push. But like, you guys grabbed a camcorder and went and did this incredible climb. And like, if you think of all the meetings I'm sure you went through with the push, and then juxtapose it to like, well, we did a cool climb and here's some footage, and it turns out to be this great film.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in life where you can come up with the reasons not to start doing it. And so I think the people that really figure out how to break through are the ones who just start, no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's
how so much of the film, like when I switched to foot powered snowboarding, at that point I was making a lot of films and or a part of a bunch of films, and I'm like, hey, it's going to take me 2 years, but I'm doing a foot powered deal. And the movie companies kept calling and being like, so what do you want to do this year? Like, I know, they worked with my sponsors and they're used to getting the checks. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm doing this foot powered thing. They're like, you really serious about that? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And the first year we had no funding. Again, I had to self-fund it, and then it started to work.
Yeah. So I've been involved in making, a handful of movies, and I feel like there's always a lot that gets cut out, right? Were there people or moments in this film that you wish would have made the cut that didn't?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I mean, not as heartbreaking as some, in the sense of like, due to our tight timeline, we did, and like Bones's movie making expertise, it was like we were pretty tight. But the toughest, we definitely had some interviews with our mutual friend Claire Gallagher, David Weiss, who really touched on some evangelical stuff that was really interesting. Leah Thompson, who really like brought the word intersectional environmentalism to the forefront, and Green Girl Leah on Instagram. I don't know if anyone follows her, but really to bring the perspective of people of color or indigenous would have, I'd say that would have loved to have brought that in. And the Leah stuff, we tried really hard. That was probably the last thing that got cut out. And it was just like, we were trying to tell too many stories, and it came down to this like one cross section. And a great example is like, why are there all these people denying climate? And the reality is like a white male is 5 times more likely to be a climate denier than a person of color. So we focused on that as this big issue, because if you think of it, it's like, how do we get here? It's a lot of white males in very powerful positions got us here.
Do you think that's because white males control the systems, and the systems kind of benefit financially from climate denial? I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Right. I mean, again, it's like, you can see from a film perspective, it's like almost this whole other deal, because it and to go down that rabbit hole, but it is like, it's something like 50 companies in the world, again, like run by white males, represent 80% of the world CO2 emissions. And, and then the juxtapose that of like, God, I forget the exact stat, but a huge stat of like black people, like 60% or something, live within 35 miles of a coal-fired power plant. And so totally, and then it's like 23 million black people are like serious on climate. And so it's, I just, again, we had to like pick our battles and get a little bit narrow, on our storyline to like make our points. And those are just the tricky things with making a film, especially with climate. There's so many different, like, how did we get here? Just answering that question gets us to, was really what we're trying to do, is how did we become so divided on climate? And it, that's what led us to who's in the film.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think of is, I feel like a good percentage of the outdoor enthusiasts, like the real passionate people who are getting out there and getting after it all the time, do believe in climate change. And my thinking behind that is that it's because we see it. I mean, you talked about it in the film. You see the glaciers receding. I see, I go to Yosemite every year, and I've, in the last couple of years, I've had to change my season. Actually, probably 3 out of the last 5 years, I've had to cancel about half my season because of closures due to forest fires or smoke in the valley. That's a new thing. I mean, in some ways, this year I tried to go to Yosemite about 3 weeks ago, and the park was open. But in the middle of my one day there, as it turns out, I showed up and I was bouldering, and it was kind of beautiful blue skies. And then this like apocalyptic wall of smoke rolled into the valley, and suddenly the air quality went down to like 400 parts per million, which is like super unhealthy. And in some ways, I don't really think that taking weather events that are happening right now and using those as examples of climate change is a great way to look at it. You kind of have to take these 30-year averages. But I think when you do that, when you bring science into it and take those 30 years averages, it's pretty unmistakable.
Like new normals, we like to say, and kind of the benchmark changes. And I lived in the West and California for 25 plus years. And it's just in those 25 years, it wasn't until like 8 years ago that we were like, man, I hope there's not smoke this year. And then just the speed of like, wow, this like the new normal is like playing, Russian roulette with fires and smoke. And as someone who, I don't like, I've realized that like smoke is the one thing that can totally shut everything down. Because it's like, oh, we had rainy weather or what have you. You can still work around that. But man, smoke is a total shutdown.
I mean, I guess for split borders, the lack of snow could do that too. I mean, California is interesting because it sits right at this temperature zone where if the temperature rises a little bit, it's a lot harder to find snow. Like I think in the past few years, a lot of times you can still mountain bike in Lake Tahoe where you live in like January. Is that something? I mean, both of us, I've been climbing for 38 years or something. You've been snowboarding for that long, so we have that 30-year perspective. Actually, right. Some of the old guys who have that 30-year perspective. Has it changed drastically? I mean, I think you alluded to this in the film, but like, can you give me some examples of how skiing or snowboarding in Tahoe Basin is really different than it used to be 30 years ago?
We've been on this like, it's all like feast or famine, erratic weather where it's like these crazy weather events with ton of snow, with huge amounts of drought. And I guess the simplest way to equate it is, and to say a climbing perspective is, say, imagine in Yosemite, you have all these options to climb, and due to heat or what have you, there's a certain temperature. And for us, with snow, it's like we're consistently getting pushed to the higher elevations, like our highest trailhead. So we have an area in Tahoe called Mount Rose, and it's we've been consistently getting pushed to that area that as soon as I don't have to be in Mount Rose, I'm not at Mount Rose, because certain years that's the only game in town. And so I can almost, you can just look at my records of how often if I don't have to be at Mount Rose and it's not in my ride logs, that means it's a good winter. And the sad part with Tahoe is our best terrain is at lake level. I know you spent time there, but around that Emerald Bay area, right off the road there, and Tahoe's killer with when we have snow at lake level, and our best chairlift is KT 22, and it's at lake level. And it's that, we used to start and end our season with the opening and closing of KT 22, and that we got that from the people before me, and now we don't do that because your season could be really short if that was like your benchmark to opening and closing of the season.
Right. Interesting.
And that's not to say, to be clear, like, yes, we have had, we had 100-inch March this year. So like with snow, it seems like you are playing the Wheel of Fortune with snow, and you either are like the big winner or the big loser. And there's no like baseline anymore. And so that's, it's just the way that it is. And we adapt or die. And that's where like e-bikes have come into play. I know you spent a lot of time down in the Yosemite area, and e-bikes have been a great tool because there we have peaks at 14,000 feet. So we can take where we're losing that lower elevation snow, and an e-bike can get you to that snow line efficiently without burning a bunch of energy.
E-bikes. E-bike ski adventures. That sounds amazing.
And the new snowmobile's the e-bike.
Yeah, you gotta innovate, I guess, in a world like this. So, like I said, I live in a pretty conservative community. I'm looking for advice on how to, for the audience here, people who have, people who maybe who have different ideas than they do about climate change and conservation and what the world is turning into. How do you start up these conversations? Can you give us advice on that?
Well, you see it in the film. I really focus on science. Is like, you talk to someone like, oh, where'd you go to college? Wow, great school. How about your kids? I bet you'd be psyched if your kids went to college like there or what have you. And well, you better keep them out of the science department because your science department has very contradicting views on your views. But at the end of the day, though, it's important to note at Protect Our Winters, we only have so many resources, so much energy, and it's really, and you see this film is really about trying to win over that person in the center or the traditional non-voter, because the energy, I do enjoy, like, someone will be like, oh my God, I'm sorry, there's like a guy's here, full Trumper at the dinner party. I'm like, I want to sit next to him. Not because I'm going to sit there and yell and debate with him. I just want to like hear him talk, get him going, to learn from him. It's like we're trying to win that middle, and the traditional non-voter is where our focus is. And the stats show, like the staunch climate denier they are in the minority. They're just very loud, and they love to be on mine and your feed, like the second we say the word clean air and clean water.
Yeah, so the name of the video that we played at the beginning of this film was Common Ground, and I feel like that was the approach in the film, is you found common ground to start with, and then you had the conversations from there. And that's what I do with my family. That's what I do with my father. We all love the environment. We love the outdoors. We want to protect these places. We have to go out and celebrate what we have first, and that gives us a venue to start the conversation. And I think that's really important.
Well said. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I think that was a very important part of the film that like reminded me of that. So I live in Colorado, and we talk a lot about climate change in terms of what this is going to mean for our sports or our children. But here in this state, I feel like there's a big like economic element, and it's probably the same in California. I mean, and then the whole idea behind a lot of Protect Our Winters campaigning these days is the outdoor state. There's 50 million people in this country who really love to get out and, and shred in the outdoors, and enjoy the outdoors. And when you combine all those people, that's bigger than the biggest state in the country. And so I love this idea that if we can rally those people, it's really going to vote in climate champions.
And yes, as we testified together with Congress, I mean, we really make the economic argument of, the outdoor industry is bigger than the extraction industry. This is a job, it employs over 70,000 more jobs than the extraction industry. And we see with the smoke, it's like, if we don't have clean air and clean water, and it's not just snowboarding or climbing, it's also Hillary Hutchinson has talked a lot about it. She's a fishing guide, and as soon as the water temp changes, gets too warm, then that shuts down that. And if you think of the ripple effects of that, that's our that's our currency. And that has definitely opened doors at the congressional level. And our goal is to, when we go in there and we say, this is a jobs issue, this is an economic issue, and we just need to unite the outdoor industry around this and use its might. And that's been challenging. But, that coupled with the fact, if we can get those 50 million people voting, because traditionally the outdoor state is outside and forgets to vote because they're having too much fun outside. And so nobody's really lost their job because of a stance on climate. And if the outdoor state shows up and votes, we are one of the biggest, strongest voter blocks in the country. And that will really change the course of the country.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some stats on this, but I don't remember for sure. But climate is like is it a top 3 issue this year? Is it a top 5 issue? I'm not really sure. It's bumping up
it needs to get in the top 3, and it's tough to track right now with the crazy, like now we got the the Supreme Court judge. But yes, it's definitely moving up the deal. But the top 3 is why if it gets in there, we're watching debates about climate. And it's wild. In 2018 election, I watched really closely. There wasn't a single debate with the word climate mentioned. This 2016, the word climate was not mentioned really in any of the presidential debates. So that's the problem, I guess, is like clean energy is economically kicking ass, and we are on this really decent path, but we need urgency and we need it. We're on like a 30-year path, and it's like those conversations I'm having in the film, if those were happening in 1991, that's great. Like, we just got to get past that, and we just need some urgency. That's the fact of the matter.
Yeah, I mean, man, so many things were going through my head as you were talking there. One, so I have a good friend, a climbing partner of mine, who actually builds coal-fired power plants for a living, and he's a climber and a mountain biker as well. And when you talk to him, you'd think he would be very on the side of coal-fired power plants, but he's like, man, renewables are kicking butt these days. Like, I'm out of a job in 4 years.
Cheapest form of energy to bring online, like just the economics of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
And your friend, sorry to interrupt, but that is so cool. Yeah, I would love to talk to your friend, but it's like that doesn't we need to take care of people like your friend as we make this transition.
Yeah, because clean energy. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clean energy is going to win. Like, there's no doubt it's going to win in the future. I mean, and clean energy is kicking butt, despite the fact that most of the government subsidies go towards fossil fuel development still. So when I hear those stats, I'm like, there is a path forward. Like, that's very uplifting to my mind. Like, even people who don't believe in climate, they do generally believe in the economics, and the economics is changing so quickly. So that's
the best. People are like, because it's intense. It's like pretty heady stuff with climate, but the optimism comes from we have the solutions and they create a shit ton of jobs.
Yeah, totally. Maybe we should go to a few questions from the audience. Yeah, for that?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so this one's from David to me. Has climate change impacted the climbing community? If so, how? I mean, I would say absolutely it's impacted the climbing community. I mean, the fact that Yosemite is closed down for in the past, like I said, Matt, past 3 out of 5 years, Yosemite is like the center of the universe for a lot of climbers, especially North American climbers, and it's closed down for 2 to 4 weeks, right in the heart of the major climbing season. 3 out of the past 5 years because of forest fires. I also the whole climbing season there, like the good temps, good sending temps is a big deal in climbing. The whole season is shifted by a month in like the past 15 years. And so it used to be during kind of summer break when people were climbing, and now it's like in October and November where people are back in school. So I think it's I mean, there is a lot more climbers these days, so a lot of people come to Yosemite and climb anyways, but it's getting harder. Also, another example is, for me, one of the mountain ranges that I am the most obsessed with are the mountains around El Chalten in South America. And these were mountains that historically have been frozen together. That's so cold. It's right near, it's very far south. It's right on the edge of a big ice cap. It's actually the biggest ice cap outside the polar region. And these mountains, for the first time in human history, are melting out during these big warm weather windows in their summer, which is our winter. And so it's creating a lot of rock fall, and usually the good weather windows are when you go and climb, but now somebody dies every good weather window down there. And so I've started to really have to ask myself this question, like, as a father, should I even climb in these mountains anymore? Is it safe enough to climb in these mountains? I mean, whole mountain range is being taken off the table for me as a climber. That's a pretty big impact. Yeah, a little bit like just like not having snow anymore to snowboard on.
Yeah, with the erratic weather, we see it with the snowpack, where it just leads to. There's a great quote of that seems to be more and more common, is things that have never happened often happen, and so we're just seeing some like bizarre snowpacks from where you'll have like a 3-month drought followed by 100 inches of snow, and then it's just so like off the charts and not necessarily like, oh my god, everything's just avalanching. It's just like nothing slides, and all of a sudden there's this like catastrophic avalanche in thick groves of trees because that's where surface horror lasted or what have you. So it's just like definitely eye-opening stuff.
Yeah. Okay, here's another one. This one's from Lila. Have you been able to use media coverage of the wildfires in California, Colorado, and so many other places in the West to help support your cause? Does this kind of coverage help show how watershed protection and runoff based on snowpack and cold winters is key for disaster recovery? You want to take a stab at this one?
I can touch on a couple things. One, it's really, I mean, for example, in San Francisco, in the city, like generally, we had this crazy event where it was literally like dark in the middle of the day. So that's just like, there's weight to that where lights are on, you have to drive with your headlights on at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day in San Francisco. And it has this kind of Armageddon type feel. And it's, you could be 70 years old and be like, wow, I've never needed my headlights to drive in the middle of the city. So it's hard. And with the forest fires, it's like, there's a couple different factors to it for sure. But the constant is, and like the magnifier of the forest fires is this, the effects of climate, meaning drier vegetation earlier. I mean, we're not even in technical fire season yet. So there's that side of things. The effects, I made a film for the 2018 election called Ode to Muir, and we really dove into the importance of snowpack. And they're absolutely right where, like, and this isn't just California, this is Colorado, like the perfect aquifer for the West is you want these snow-covered mountains that are slowly melting and just feeding the rivers that feed the crops and what have you. In the case of California, it's like 60% of our drinking water comes from the Sierra. Like 60% of that water is used to grow the crops in California. And so you take snow out of the equation, and that nice, like, natural aquifer of trickling snowmelt, if you juxtapose that to, say, a big winter storm where it rains to the top and it just blows out all our water capturing capabilities, it just is an example of why, snow is what makes the West work, just from a water perspective. So that's very alarming.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like you have to be careful with weather events and climate change because, sometimes you'll have a polar vortex in the middle of winter, which in my mind, that's also, I mean, it's climate change. It's not just warming. We happen to live in places that are warming like the American West, but the American East is actually like wetter and maybe a little bit colder in a lot of ways than it's been in a lot of years. But that, in my mind, is climate change related too. So
there's a great stat where, and again, like science has been really clear, more erratic weather. So that means on both ends, and we're breaking records all over the place, whether it's most snow in 48 hours, least amount of snow, what have you. But it's something like we break 30,000, just from a temperature perspective, 30,000 records, warming records. But we also break 10,000 cold records. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It shows you it's not just warming, it's just a larger proportion are from warming. But yes, we're still, Florida's freezing, and they're losing oranges, and because it's like getting below zero in Florida, which has never happened. So you're totally right to not equate a single weather event as climate. And I'm always like, never jump on the warm the warm records or the cold records, because that happens. But we're just seeing more of both, and sadly more warm weather records.
Yeah. And again, you just got to take that 30-year perspective, like really zoom out and see how things are changing on that kind of long scale. Okay, so let's take another question here. This one's from Rob. Do you think it would be possible to have a sensible conversation with some of the hardcore disbelievers? Is there anything you would change on how to approach a conversation with someone with this point of view? Similar to your experience, it seems that many are not even open to listening to an alternative point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on this, but in the film, I talk to like professional climate deniers who come in just like guns ablazing, and I go into that knowing like, all right, I'm gonna try to find common ground, which is what that spot at the beginning of the film is all about. And I guess in the film, to touch on a different aspect of that, because I feel like we talked about this, what was so interesting to me is how strong these guys came at me and are telling me like, no, it's actually snowing more. You got more snow than you had. And one guy, Mark Morano, or I think the guy with the Climate Hoax 2 in the background in the, this professional climate denier, I had fun with him. He's like fast talking, just kind of going, he would just kind of a little bit crazy at times, but fun guy to talk to. But at the end of the film, I'm like, hey, because we had to, these conversations you see in the film are like an hour and a half long. And with Mark, I'm like, we had some good laughs and stuff, because I know I'm not going to win this guy and flip him. His whole identity, his job is based on being a climate denier. But at the end, I'm like, Mark, dude, a piece of advice, like you got to lose the snow bit, dude. Like that, it's just, trust me, it's going to bite you in the ass. Like there's just too much data of rain to the top of the mountain in Jackson Hole that we've never seen. Now it's coming more consistent. The FIS World Cup, just look at the 100 years of events, even though they now have snowmaking, they're canceling. It's very common to cancel a bunch of events because of no snow in places that they've held events for over 100 years. And so I guess that would be an example. And people like that, I don't have the magic words for them.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take another one. This one's from Lily. It says, thanks. Specifically in Western North Carolina, we are ski towns and have had resorts operating for decades. However, the majority of ski resorts across the U.S. seem to ignore that we ski in the South. Living in both a conservative South as well as a ski town that is affected by climate change harshly every year with more rain days than snow days. How do we get both the rest of the ski community as well as the climate change advocacy groups to see the Southeast? Good to plug Outdoor State. Interesting. So they feel left out, I guess, in Western North Carolina from organizations that I guess are more Western centric.
That's why we're here.
Right. So we're having this event today. Absolutely.
I've done 3 of these with Purple Mountain. So we're here to help you.
Yeah. And we're trying to make friends in all places. And so hearing about people who want to champion climate causes in places that we haven't historically had conversations with, like Lily, is going to be a path towards that. So thank you so much for the question. And that's like Jeremy said, that's one of the reasons we're here. Okay, let's see here. Okay, question for Jeremy. What would you say are the best ways for younger individuals, such as myself, to make a significant impact on the topic of climate change? And ultimately, how does one reach a level of influence in this conversation comparable to you?
Well, for one, I'm so excited that you are here and we have found you, because traditionally 18 to 35-year-olds are getting significantly outvoted by these older generations. And if the 18 to 35-year-old demographic shows up this election, and a lot is going to change. So I would say talk to your friends, get involved locally. They're at every level of the ballot, and we have a ballot guide coming out pretty soon with Protect Our Winners, or I think it might be POW Action Fund is the ballot guide. But at every level, even down to the public utility district, there's a lot really matters on a climate perspective. So hopefully we can educate you with that and help these, local leaders as well as these national leaders get elected. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but
Yeah, I mean, vote. That's the main. That's the main.
Get your friends to vote.
Yeah, vote. Get your friends to vote. Talk about voting. Make a plan to vote. Like that's the main thing we can do right now, and that's sort of the easiest way, in a lot of ways. But if you want to go above and beyond that, there's plenty of opportunity to do that. Like one thing you can do this year is you can volunteer to be a poll worker. With COVID, so many of the poll workers are retired people generally, and they, if they're immune compromised or they're worried about COVID and going and being in public places, they're not going to volunteer this year. So there's a big shortage of poll workers this year. So that's a great way to get out and help a little bit more. You can also just get involved in your local nonprofit. I think that's a big one. Let's see here. Speaking of making a plan to vote, how can you tell us what's the way to do that through POW right now? What's the tools that we have?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, and this is, I'm assuming if you're on this, you're teed up for voting, but it's makeadamnplan.org. Okay, there we go. I got it right. Nice. But as this election approaches, voting in the middle of a pandemic is a little more challenging than normal. Not by chance, a lot of these key states, which North Carolina is one of them, the more like of a battleground, what have you, the more complicated they're trying to make voting. And this Make a Damn Plan, I've had a bunch of especially first-time voters contact me and be like, oh my God, thank you so much for that. I had no idea what to do. And so it's one-stop shopping. Don't own a printer. Who owns a printer? Not many people own printers anymore. We can help with that. Need a stamp? We can help with that. Need an envelope? Make a Damn Plan helps with that. So it's literally just get plugged in and really your friends that again, traditionally these non-voters, it just lays out a really simple roadmap for that.
Yeah. And so obviously the presidential election is a big one this year, but I think one of the reasons that I was hesitant to vote a lot in the past is I didn't feel like I knew how to vote down the ballot. I didn't take the time to research the local issues, the Senate races, all that kind of stuff. Luckily, POW Action Fund has, you touched on this a minute ago, but they've created this tool, which is incredible for helping us walk through that process. And it's just simply the voter guide. Is that right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. I mean, it will launch here very soon, and you'll.
Yeah, I think tomorrow. I think POW Action Fund launches tomorrow, right?
Yeah, it's the kickoff party.
Right on. So yeah, join the Outdoor State. Get that voter guide, the guidebook, and get out to the polls. Anything else you want to add before we sign off tonight, Jeremy?
Well, I see this, Christina. I'm 29, voted in every election. And, I'm in a dark red state, and does my vote really matter? Gerrymandering, etc. Totally understand, the uphill battle there. But it's democracy requires participation. Definitely, it's our best tool we have, and it, again, maybe it's in these bigger ticket elections, you don't feel like your vote matters, but maybe further down the ballot it does. So it's just, we have to vote for sure in certain areas. It's, they're stronger leaning one way or another. But again, maybe down ballot, it's a tighter race. And so maybe this election gets momentum. I live in my congressman is one of the top 10, worst congressmen on voting for the environment. He's 0 for 277 opportunities to do something positive for the environment. He doesn't live in the district. He doesn't debate. He hardly comes to the district, and he wins by 10 plus points every year. We still pound the pavement, knock on doors, do everything we can. And the last election, we got it to, he won by 8%, and we're excited. And we're giving her our all on this election, and going into it with everything we have, and maybe we get it to 4%, and maybe we beat them. I don't know, but so I kind of feel your pain on that in just my local congressman.
Yeah, and voting is the most important thing we can do right now in this moment. But just getting impassioned about these topics and spreading the word through your community is what is going to make it a top 3 issue, and it's going to create the opportunity for somebody to get not elected for the first time because of their climate stance. And so I think it's a little bit about creating the habit, I don't know, I think about recycling a lot. Like, recycling's kind of broken. Like, a lot of that stuff we throw into the recycling bin doesn't actually get recycled, but we need everybody to keep up the habit, because someday the infrastructure is going to be there and all that stuff is going to get recycled. But if people aren't in the habit, there's not going to be the resource. So it's the same way with voting. Cool, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tommy. Such a pleasure to talk with you and everyone that came out. Thank you so much. And I see all these awesome questions. I wish we had more time, but yeah. Big props to North Carolina.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who got inside before I guess it is dark in North Carolina, actually. So but
that's the whole disconnect. It's still sunny out in California. So sorry for my tardiness, everyone.
Yeah, definitely. But get out there and vote. Thank you for showing up tonight. The fact that you're here, that so many people showed up to watch this film tonight, gives me great hope and optimism. All right. Peace out, everyone. Thanks so much.
The outdoor community is over 50 million people, and that's almost 40% of the number of voters in the 2016 elections. And the outdoor community and young people are historically bad at turning out. Even if you feel like it doesn't matter, just please, please, please vote.